Hello and welcome to the first of possibly many top 5 or top 10 videos on this channel. FE7, Rekka no Ken, or whatever the hell you want to call it, was the first game in the Fire Emblem series that I played, and I'd say it's still one of the best and possibly my most played game of all time. To date, I've gone through the entire game, well, most of the game, over 20 times now, and quite frankly, I'm a bit tired of it. But before I reach the point where just thinking about the adventures of Eli Wood and his friends makes me want to puke my guts out, let's talk characters. Fire Emblem 7's cast is one of the strongest and most well-rounded of any games I've ever played, blah blah blah. What's the point? You know what this video is going to be about, you've seen the title, so let's just cut to the chase and get with it. This is my top 5 Fire Emblem 7 characters. But before we delve in, I'd just like to note that these are entirely decided by my opinion. You are unlikely to agree with my choices, and that's fine, just don't be an asshat about it, okay? Good, then let's get this road on the show. Near the end of the adventure, the reclusive bishop called Reynolds can join your army, assuming you don't take too long to reach his home during the chapter Victory or Death. The only reason he decides to help you out is to end the fighting going on around him and get some peace and quiet. He flat out tells you he isn't interested in your reasons for fighting, even though your goal is to save the world. This guy is one cool cat. Now, my reasoning for having him on this list has nothing to do with his combat abilities. For a level 16 promoted unit, his stats aren't anything special at all, especially that 12 magic. Blech! He'd be lucky to even dent the super powerful enemies in the final chapter. His defense is decent though, especially compared to the other two bishops, but you'll probably only want to add him to your army just so you could take his fortified staff and give it to someone who'd make better use of it. But despite being almost useless in battle, Reynolds is still a very interesting and badass character, and he has lived an eventful life to say the least. Why exactly is he living on Dread Isle anyway, considering it's the place no one dares go to? The answer to this question, and many others, lie within his support conversations. I love support conversations. They are a great way to add depth to each character, no matter how unimportant they might be to the main plot, and I think that no character takes better advantage of them than Reynolds does. By seeing each of these support conversations, you'll be able to piece together more and more of his backstory and what eventually leads him to live as a hermit on an island far away from civilization. I won't go into details about it here, but let's just say he wasn't always such a holy man. And on the other side of the coin, you have his conversations with Bartray, which are perhaps the funniest in the entire series. Whoever decides to pair these two up deserves a huge raise because they are pure comedy gold. If it was up to me, they'd get their own sitcom. On top of being a mysterious and intriguing character, Reynolds is also a brilliant comedian. Who would have thought it? Considering what a stats freak I am and Reynolds' raidability, the fact that I've placed him as my 5th favourite character based on the strength of his character alone surprises even me, but as the greatest example of what support conversations add to the game's story, he truly deserves it. I don't want to begin a heated discussion about which characters are good and which ones aren't, and by golly there's been enough of those, but I personally don't enjoy using pre-promoted units. With less level ups to gain than unpromoted units and worse growth rates in general, they aren't as rewarding to use. However, there are exceptions to this. Take the mages from Fire Emblem 7 for example. Urk has the best availability, but his magic growth rate of 40% just isn't high enough for my tastes. Magic users are typically frail, they can't afford to let too many enemies live. And as for Nino, while she may have great potential, she joined so late into the game when she'd already have a powerful army, I usually can't be bothered to train her up. And really, why bother with her when you already have a powerful sage on your team called Pent? The very first time you see him, you need to rescue him from bandits in this game's desert chapter, but you'll quickly find out he doesn't need much protecting. In fact, he can pretty much kill every enemy on the field by himself. He almost seems too cool for your army. But a few chapters later, he'll join your team alongside his wife, lucky bitch, Louise. If either her or Pent fall in battle, they'll both leave your group for good, so be careful of that. Pent's stats are respectable for any level 6 sage and he'll instantly make a great addition to your roster. He has plenty of magic and speed to kill most enemies easily, and his defense is decent for any unit, let alone a magic user. His growth rates aren't anything spectacular, but they certainly aren't terrible, and with 14 potential level ups, he has plenty of opportunity to improve. Heck, I'd say 30% in defense is extremely good for a pre-promote. That's the same as Elijahwood's defense growth, and he's meant to be the main character. Not only does he have better survivability than Urk and Nino, he is also a much better staff user. Whilst those two would struggle to reach even C for staffs before the end of the game, Pent begins at A. He can use any staff in the game immediately and has more than enough magic to use them efficiently. Even if you're the sort who refuses to let pre-promotes take any kills unless absolutely necessary, Pent can fit into your team just fine as a staff bot. From the time he joins until the end of the game, Pent is an incredibly useful unit, and if I could choose to be one character from the Fire Emblem universe, it would be him. He just has it made. He's an expert user of magic, he's cool and sure of himself, he has a gorgeous wife, and he has an awesome cape. He has made me overcome my prejudice against pre-promotes enough to be my 4th favourite character in the game. Along with Pokemon, Fire Emblem is my favourite video game series of all, but as highly as I regard it now, my first impressions of FE7 weren't actually too good, and the reason why can be summed up with 2 words: Lin's Tao. One of the most boring and overly long tutorial sections of any game ever, starring a character I didn't care for at the time and can't stand today. Piss off, Lin. But during this dark time, there was an unexpected hero, a knight in shining armour if you will. He understood that this wasn't a particularly fun introduction to the series for Western players, but he would damn himself for all eternity if he let us give up without really giving it a chance. And who could this wonderful man possibly be? It's none other than Soni, the womanising, lean green machine cavalier. There have been a number of characters in this series who would hit on anything with a double X chromosome, but Soni will always be my favourite because without him, I might not even be playing this series at all. During Lin's Tale, Soni is considered important enough to the story so that he will appear in most of the cutscenes. This means he will try to chat up just about every female you come across, and I couldn't wait to see what sort of silver tongue nonsense will come out of his mouth next. Underneath all the permanent death and serious themes of Fire Emblem, the series can be downright hilarious at times. Soni and his antics were my first exposure to its humour. It's nice to know that no matter how dark these games get, there will always be people like Soni around to lighten the mood. Assuming they don't get killed in battle, that is. And the guy isn't a total sleazeball if that would bother you. When he hits on Louise in their first support conversation and finds out she's already married, he berates himself for going too far. He's also a good friend to Ken even if he does drive his super serious companion up the wall. Soni is just as much fun to use during gameplay as well. Cavaliers are easily my favourite early game units with their high movement and access to swords and lances, but Soni has much higher strength growth than you expect from his class, weighing in at a massive 60%. He's like a fighter on horseback, only he doesn't consistently let me down like that class does. He's the perfect choice if you want someone who can charge on ahead and slaughter all in his wake as quickly as possible. Although most of his other stats aren't as stellar, they are decent enough, and his 80% HP growth prevents him from being frail. In many ways, Soni is like Edgar from Final Fantasy VI. They both join early, they're both womanizers, and though they seem goofy and comical, they are consistently great units throughout both their games. And again, if it weren't for Soni, I might have never got past Lin's Tale and missed out on what is now my other favourite video game series. So thank you, Soni. You are my 3rd favourite character from Fire Emblem 7. Just as I'm biased against pre-promotes, I'm also biased towards characters who start off weak but become powerful with a lot of work. It's so rewarding to watch them tear armies apart when they used to die if so much as a leaf touched them. Well, as long as the payout doesn't take too long, or said character joins too late into the game. Sorry, Nino. There are some characters like this that join near the beginning, giving you all the time in the world to build them up. Like Florina, for example. When I first played the game, I was intrigued by the idea of a Pegasus Knight. I'd already played Advanced Wars and controlled its air units. Transport copters were fun to use, but they can't attack and could only carry infantry. They also got killed by everything easily. Why couldn't they be more like their badass cousins, the battle copters? So here I had a unit who could not only transport just about anyone, but could take part in battle as well. Only the problem was, she wasn't very good at fighting, especially compared to Soni and Ken, but she was the only character at this point who could fly over any terrain, and that alone was a good reason to use her, and with enough work she eventually becomes an amazing fighter. Her HP and defense growths aren't great, sure, but with high speed and luck growths she'll eventually avoid everything that's thrown at her like a ninja. I just love how Fire Emblem's evasion system allows characters with poor defences to become difficult to kill, and only because no one can land a hit on them. Once she gets strong enough to defend herself, it's tempting to let her fly ahead and kill everything on her own. Just don't get too reckless with her, because you never know when a bit of bad luck could strike her down. Now, as for her personality, she is just so freaking adorable. She is actually the character to make me realise just how cute shy girls are. And this girl isn't just shy, she is the shyest character in fiction ever. You just want to wrap her up in cotton wool and protect her from the world, which incidentally is what you have to do with her during gameplay until she gets stronger. How clever that her personality would fit her playstyle. She also makes one half of the cutest couple ever, with a certain lord. Fire Emblem 7 has the most lords of any game in the series with a whopping 3. Unfortunately, there's really only one I actually liked. Eli Wood's stats are underwhelming and he has a boring personality, and then, blech, don't make me laugh. Once her Manikati breaks, she's nothing, and her whole personality just rubs me the wrong way. I don't care if she's the first character ever controlled in this series, she means nothing to me. But maybe it's not that these two are bad by usual standards, it's that I love the third lord so much he makes those two look boring, power and weak. He is the Ostia Thunderbolt, he is the Blue Armor Tank, he is the Hectorcutioner, my #1 favourite character in the game! Hector is the coolest, toughest son of a bitch around, both in story and in gameplay. Whereas Eli Wood is the all-round lord and Lynn's the speedster, Hector is the heavyweight of the trio, and even though I've expressed my dislike of using slow-ass armoured knights in the past, with their painful low movement and awful speed, Hector isn't quite the same. Oh no 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 no. He can hit as hard as they can and take a lot of punishment, and I mean a lot, but he doesn't feel nearly as clunky as knights do. He has just enough skill and luck to land most of his hits, despite using the most inaccurate weapon, axes. His 35% speed growth might not sound like much compared to the ridiculous sort of growth rates you see in later games, but in a game full of enemies weighed down by steel weapons, it's plenty high enough. You'll be surprised at how often he will double attack enemies. About the only complaint I have is that he promotes very late into the game in his story and will fall behind the rest of your army for quite some time. And by the time he does promote, all the worst levels in the game have been completed. But he's virtually unstoppable before and after this time, so I can forgive him for this slump. So even though playing Super Smash Bros. Melee was the first time I ever heard about Fire Emblem, I've never cared much for Marth and Roy. I've always found them dull. They have such boring goody two-shoes personalities, and Eli Wood is just the same. But Hector, oh boy, he's nothing of the sort. He can be rude, brash and abrasive, but underneath it all, he's the most loyal companion you could ever hope to have. He cares deeply for his friends, but he spares no mercy for those who wrong him. To me, he has the perfect balance of character strengths and weaknesses that a main character should have. Forget Eli Wood, Hector is the true hero of this game for me. Now let's go back onto the subject of Hector and Florina as a pairing. If there's one thing in this world that confuses me, it's character shipping. I can't think of anything more pointless. Why do people get into heated flame wars over which fictional characters should be together or not, if there's absolutely no chance of it happening in the official story? I just don't get it at all. But when it comes to Fire Emblem, I love playing Cupid to my army because it could actually be canon. And this seemingly ill-suited pair are my favourite potential couple in the series. Florina is the shyest character of all time, while Hector is about as loud and crazy as someone gets. But good god, they're so adorable together! Not to mention, during gameplay their affinity support combination increases defense by 3 points whenever there are 3 spaces within each other. So you see, I have gameplay reasons for pairing them up as well. Well, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and don't worry, text will remain the standard form of commentary on this channel. I just feel the need to speak sometimes. Ta-ta!